I'm Xavier Wiggins, and this is the Power of Sport podcast. Welcome to the second episode of Power of Sport. The Sport for Peace project has been launched at Belfast Newforge Sports Complex, marking the start of a 4-year cross-border initiative using sport to promote inclusion and positive community relations across Ulster's 9 counties. Supported by the Peace Plus programme, the project is led by Ulster GAA alongside the FAI, Ulster Rugby and the IFA. More than 6,000 participants will be engaged through 96 schools and 80 sports clubs across 14 council areas. The programme focuses on sustained participation, combining sport with education, leadership and volunteering to build long-term community connections. The Street Soccer Foundation will host its first National Street Soccer Academy Coaches Conference across 3 venues in England this February. The free in-person events will bring together coaches from professional football club community organisations working to tackle youth homelessness. Taking place in Leicester, Sheffield and London on the 24th, 25th, 26th of February, the conferences will focus on shared purpose, curriculum alignment and strengthening a national coaching network. Renowned coach and leadership expert Frank Dick, OBE, will headline all 3 events. Attendance will form part of the pathway for clubs delivering the academy in 2026. For booking the courses, please see the Power of Sport newsletter, and you can use the link in that. Last weekend, all 36 EFL matches across the Championship, League 1 and League 2 kicked off 1 minute later to support the Every Minute Matters campaign by Sky Bet and the British Heart Foundation. Launched in 2024, the initiative promotes CPR awareness and aims to train 500,000 people across the UK. Cardiac arrest survivor and Bristol Rovers defender Tom Lockyer highlighted the life-saving impacts of CPR, with football helping deliver the message nationwide. In Wales, Welsh Athletics and Mind Cymru have launched a 2-year partnership using running to improve mental health across Wales. The initiative will train mental health champions in 100 athletic clubs and 60 social running groups. Champions will support well-being conversations and challenge stigma and encourage participation in physical activity. The partnership highlights evidence that regular activity can improve mental well-being and reduce the risk of depression. Shropshire-based charity Taking Football to Africa and Beyond is celebrating 20 years of redistributing donated football kits to underprivileged communities. Operating from RAF Shawbury, the charity has delivered more than 425,000 items to over 70 countries and will travel to Kenya later this month. Leeds Rhinos and the Good Racing Company have launched a year-long partnership to raise funds and awareness for MND, celebrating the legacy of Rob Burrow, CBE. The partnerships begin with the Good Racing Company sponsoring Leeds' match against York Knights on the 20th of February. Since 2020, the Rob Burrow Racing Club has donated £210,000 to MND charities, inspired by Burrow's words, "Every single day is precious." The First Kick Foundation has become a formal partner of the Muslim Sports Foundation, working together to promote inclusion, well-being and community connection through sport. The partnership will deliver culturally sensitive programs designed to reduce barriers to participation, strengthen communities and support positive mental health outcomes. Finally, if you have news from the Sport for Good sector, please do get in touch at news@sportlocalaction.org. We want to hear about your impact reports that you're releasing, any new programs, any vacancies that you have, people moving on, just anything at all from the Sport for Good sector. That email address again is news@sportlocalaction.org. And now we're absolutely delighted to move on to the second podcast, second Power of Sport podcast. Features me, Xavier Wiggins, in conversation with Francesca Brown, one of the UK's leading voices in sport for development, women's empowerment and mental health advocacy. An award-winning international speaker, Prince's Trust Ambassador and founder of the Goals4Girls programme, Francesca draws on her lived experience and football background to support girls from marginalised communities. During the episode, she reflects on her journey from a career-ending injury and clinical depression at 16 to founding Goals for Girls in 2011. Since launch, the programme has supported more than 2,000 young women through mentoring, football and education. The Power of Sport podcast is released weekly, each Thursday on Spotify and YouTube. Okay, so Francesca, thanks so much for joining us on Power of Sport. This is episode 2, early days, but really excited about how it's all going to go. So tell the viewers, the listeners, what a little bit about Goals for Girls. What do you exist for, and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Francesca Brown. I'm the CEO and founder of Goals4Girls. And Goals4Girls is a female-led charity. It's established to support girls and young women aged 11 to 16 from inner city and underserved communities. We exist to address the barriers young girls face in relation to participation, well-being, confidence, career progression, particularly within sport and education. And we were founded about 12 years ago, and we work primarily with girls who are from underrepresented communities, who experience social, emotional, and structural barriers that may limit access to positive opportunities. We are established and we do operate across London and other urban areas, working in partnership with schools, community organisations, stakeholders to deliver safe, inclusive, structured sports curriculum and educational wellbeing provision across, the school and educational bodies.
That's great, thank you. And tell us about how did you get into that? Tell us a bit about your early journey and your footballing experience. How did it all happen?
So when I was younger, I used to play 2 sports. One was football. One was I used to be an athlete, run 100-meter sprinter, and I got involved because my dad used to run at a very high level with Dwayne Chambers and Darren Campbell, and I was within that sporting world and ethos. My auntie is Darren Medell, so we kind of have a sporting background within the family, which almost churned through my blood. And then what happened was I, from a very, very young age, ended up participating at local community grassroots organisations to just play for the fun of it. Around my local area, I would participate with all the boys, and I just fell in love with football really, and how that basically, engaged me with making friends and building relationships and just feeling good within myself. And then obviously through football and being within athletics, I used to run for the schools, and they picked me up. Actually, it's a funny story. The same person who picked my dad up as an athlete picked me up as an athlete, as a runner.
And how old was that?
So I must have been about 12 years old when I got picked up, and I represented England through Sale Harriers, and then I went off around the same period of time for the Manchester United community team, because there wasn't an established academy for girls at that time. And then I got picked up by City, who were obviously vastly ahead of the academy pyramid for young women and girls. So I was in there for about three seasons in the Man City Academy, and then I was in athletics from about age 12 to about 16.
Wow. Okay, and just tell us, what was your record in the 100 meters?
I can't remember now. Like literally, it was fast, but I can't even remember what it was.
Yeah.
But I was the national champion at the time, and represented. The thing is, you could only, to be able to represent England, you had to qualify through a time, and obviously that was going up against a lot of people through the whole of the UK, and I was one of the ones who nationally qualified to go and represent in Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, nice. And so away from sport at that time, can you tell us a bit about what was going on and how that's kind of helped to led you into Goals for Girls and being passionate about supporting girls? Tell us a bit about your journey away from sport.
Yeah, like from a young age, I didn't even realize that my underlying issues and barriers that I was facing all stemmed from my community, my upbringing, and just things that I had experienced in life, which was almost causing me a lot of anxiety, depression, and wider issues, mental health issues that from a young girl, especially when you're going into, adolescence and your body is changing, that you don't quite understand, especially if no one's educated you around that. So for me personally, I was going through this phase that I didn't understand who I was as a young woman. And I didn't understand my body, the changes in my body, and the experiences and barriers that I was facing, especially in my community as a young Black woman. There wasn't many individuals who looked like me or represented me. So for me, growing up in a household where, there was a lack of that education, a lack of that understanding, and a lack of communication to allow me to understand who I am and who I was becoming, ended up meaning that through all the barriers that I was facing and the issues I was undergoing within my personal relationships with my parents and beyond, I came to a halt where I was undergoing severe mental health issues. But I only understood that I was going through the mental health issues when I stopped playing sport. Okay. And where it hit me massively. And I went into this really black hole. And it wasn't until I when I tried to take my own life, where my counselor and my counselor turned around and said to me that actually you've undergone like deep psychotic depression, and you wouldn't have realized that because you was playing sport and the sport was acting as a natural and like endorphin releasing these positive experiences, and how can I describe it, just positive I'm trying to get the word.
That doesn't matter, that's fine. But when your counsellor said that they felt that this was really helping, the sport had been the help, the anchor, did that surprise you?
It did, because it's something that I wasn't well educated on. It's something that we, from my background, it was a taboo subject, talking about things like periods and, your mental health and that psychological effect of being a young woman. And especially the fact that, being brought up in a household which didn't look like me or could experience the racial abuse I was having at the time, or experiences of discrimination within my classroom and beyond, it stood out a lot. It was quite apparent that if nobody was going to educate me on that, I would have just thought that sport was sport and mental health was mental health, and none of those worlds collided until I was, in deep counseling, and my counselor turned around and said to me, actually, no, you are going through, chronic depression, and your sport kept you afloat. And without that, you probably would have gone into a deep hole much more sooner than you actually have.
Yeah. And once they said that, did you get back very quickly then into sport, or did you need a bit more of a break from it, or how did it kind of spur you on to get straight back in? How did that happen?
I think the whole derail of me going into being diagnosed with chronic depression and being hospitalized and then coming out and, going through that whole process, it happened so quickly, where I singly just deteriorated, visibly deteriorated, but all that pain and suffering was happening for years behind closed doors. So it wasn't a single aha moment, oh my gosh, I need to get back into sport to help me recover. It was more of I need to work on myself, because it gave me, through that recovery perspective, it gave me purpose. I came to realize that, there was a lot to do in regards to my own self-help journey, my own building blocks to get back onto the path. I knew that I couldn't just rely on sport. I had to actually solve the issues that was underlying, and not rely on sport to be that natural endorphin. But I did work on it side by side. So I'd naturally do light jogging. I'd naturally go and play with friends still. But I understood that through my path, I was still isolated. I was still misunderstood. I was still slipping through gaps of support. So the frustration came from actually, moving to London at the age of, 18, saying to myself, I have to start again, and actually working on me rather than relying on sport to be the only endorphin. I think they both have to work hand in hand. And that's why things like the Goals for Girls programs are so important, because we marry up mental health and well-being support with sport. And that is what is needed, because a young person has to understand themselves and then use sport as a catalyst to kind of manage those emotions and use it as a preventative rationale rather than the ultimate problem solver.
Yeah, got it. And how, just going back slightly, what kind of, leaving as a young woman, leaving Manchester to go to London, how did you take that decision? Did you see that as a fundamental part of your recovery, or how did you decide that was going to happen?
Yeah, when I moved from Manchester, one thing I realized is through my recovery, I was relapsing a lot in Manchester. And it was because of the fact that regardless of what treatment I was going under or what, therapeutic support I was in, my relapse was always my surroundings. And just PTSD of past, someone could bring up something from, a story in the past, and it will trigger me straight away. And those triggers, unfortunately, they were not to any detriment of my family. It was just the circumstances that we were in. So for me personally, it was about, okay, how can I get up and stand on my own 2 feet and try and understand myself and stop asking myself all the time, why is this happening to me? Why do I feel like this? And what I start asking myself is, what can this experience be used for? And I realized that when I moved to London and I worked, I was one of those really, I'm not saying they're annoying, but then people who constantly approach you on the street doing the charity work. And then I worked my way up as head of fundraising. And then I've worked in, the events business and launching events and things like that. And I wanted to get my youth work diploma. And once I was going through that process, I really realized that there was a group of women, young women, who had been misunderstood and were facing the same barriers as me. And I felt, even though I was down here for, when I came here at age 18, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to survive down here, if I was going to be able to survive in the big city of London, where the cost of living is like 2 or 3 times as much. So for me, it was like sink or swim. And I was determined not to go back to relapsing. And with that determination, I kind of put my passion, my purpose, but also my lived experience into the girls who are in the youth center. And through that, passion of not wanting those girls to turn out, or not turn out, but, experience the same things that I experienced, it then turned into something amazing. And that was Goals for Girls.
Brilliant. So that was about 12 years ago that Goals for Girls was created. Incredible. And so you chose to do this through football. I mean, you talked about athletics, but why is football so good for this sort of intervention? Do you think, having seen, I'm sure you've been around a number of different sports people now over the years, but why does football do that?
Yeah, football is a universal sport, and it's something which you can integrate across multicultures and individuals. It's not an individual sport. Athletics was an individual. You had to beat your own personal time. You didn't rely on a team. You didn't have to be a talker. You could be an isolated person and still perform well on the track. for me, football gave me something which, communication, leadership skills, understanding where your role is in the team, and understanding how to, how to coordinate and understand other cultures and people. And it was just a universal language. And for many girls, especially those who are struggling with their mental health, traditional interventions feel clinical, they feel intimidating, they feel loaded with stigma, and football doesn't ask them to explain how they're feeling before they've even worked out the words for themselves. It's movement, connection, play. It's familiar for them. It's social. It's non-threatening. And when you put all those characteristics together, you create a young person who feels safe, a girl who feels that she can talk, and she can open up. And then you start building and breaking down the building blocks of that emotional resilience, the barriers that they face on and off the field. And for me, on the pitch, a girl can release emotional, physical before they can even articulate it. So there's a story that I have where there was a girl, and she'd come on the football field and she'd always be really chatty, smiley, but she'd be aggressive in her play. And I used to try and teach that out of her, and the reason being is because at home she was always isolated. She was always told she couldn't. She was always told, she couldn't be the lively person she was, and told she wasn't good enough. And she used to let that out on the football field. And it was now asking her, how do we manage that emotion? And you could see that through her style of play, like years later, after coaching her and mentoring her, and embodying that experience of running, kicking, laughing, sometimes failing on the pitch. It creates a different entry point to healing, and it meets them where they are. It's not asking them to be in a service and live up to a certain expectation. It's actually saying, we're going to meet you where you are. We're going to allow you to express yourself. And when you're ready, you can now let out that emotional offload.
And when you're getting the girls into Goals4Girls, and you're creating that safe space for them, how kind of intentional, how carefully are you doing that? How quickly do they become comfortable? And is it really? So I'm asking a couple of things here, but is it really because you're very relatable? You've been through what lots of those are going through. How do you get across quickly and firmly and powerfully how this is going to be a safe space for them?
Yeah, I think personally for me is I learned a lot about my own journey. I learned a lot of where my story started and where it ends, and where the organization came from and what it was deeply rooted in. And I believe that, lived experience is a powerful thing. When you can relate to somebody and understand their journey, it creates a different type of relationship. And it doesn't come with an emotional labor or, being shocked when you hear unexpected stories. It helps when you've got old wounds. It helps when you're living your own trauma in some kind of effect to help other girls solve, because you've come out the other end of it. And I think that's a powerful thing in regards to when you're dealing with young people and you're building an organization like this, and you're deeply rooted in trauma and of many young women and girls. It's ensuring that the organization holds its boundaries. It sits with its charitable aims, but also it makes sure that we are building it around the individuals who understand the purpose and the individual who is taking part in these programs. And it's super important for me, as you know, we're a female-led organization. That automatically, eradicates one of the major barriers of a young girl, especially in certain communities that we live in, who might be, highly, we might be in a highly Muslim or Asian community, and a lot of those girls can't participate in sport because if they're male-led, their parent won't allow them to do that. So for me personally, it's about how do we eradicate that before they even open the front door, by having a female-led member of staff welcome them in, and then layering in that with somebody who's got lived experience, and then layering that with somebody who has a wealth of experience in maybe traumatic response, or support, or sustainable pathways into support education. You're providing immediate role models which allow girls to thrive in those environments, and they allow them to feel safe and open. So to answer your question, for me, it's always about the wealth of lived experience. And that's the first layer. The second layer is then, how do we get, the girls connected? By having the majority of our staff female-led, we're able to allow the girls to connect immediately before they even open their mouths, as soon as they step foot on the field. And then from there, then how do we respond to the trauma? And that is, again, through not only lived experience, but also, professional experience, and binding that all together, we create a holistic program and holistic charity which enables a young girl to thrive in whatever they're going through. And Goals4Girls isn't about girls who just with trauma. It's about girls who just are facing barriers. There's just girls who want to play sport professionally, but parents might not be able to afford it. So we're bridging that gap between the grassroots, the professional, the education, and beyond.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you. Para sport is about that impact, and you're living and breathing it. Can you give us a story or two, a kind of a case study or two of people that you've helped, just to help the viewer, the listener, really understand how they come out the other side of this fantastic work?
Yeah. You know what? We've got so many girls who've come out the other side. We've had girls who work for us. We've had girls who have gone on to play internationally, whether that's for Madrid, in America. We've got girls over there. We've got girls who've gone on to, who never probably would have been seen on the football field because of the environment they're in. We've helped girls be able to navigate the system to go on to professional football. Some of our football tournaments that we launched last year, we had 8 girls registered to the England talent pathway, and 1 girl went all the way through to the first team, which is absolutely amazing. And then to top that off, we've had girls who have been in very, very deep trauma, who are, there's a girl who she wanted to take her own life. Face to face, you would have thought that nothing was going on at home. And if it wasn't for Goals4Girls, I don't think she'd be here today. And she's thriving now. She's in an art, and she's doing, art masters. She's a teacher now. She was in care. We had to put her in care because I remember when we came back from France, when it was the Women's World Cup, we stepped foot off the minibus, and her parent had left bin bags there and told her that she's our responsibility now. And we had to navigate that whole system for her and still keep her in school without her taking her own life. And we got her through her exams. We got her through COVID. And we had a therapeutic support mentor on her all the time. And she came out the other side, and now she's absolutely thriving. We got her housing sorted for her and everything, and she's come out the other end and she's thriving. And many people who would have come to our charity launch event at the Arsenal Emirates Stadium heard her testimony, and they said it was extremely powerful and moving, because it's something that we hear of, but you just don't hear in real life. And for her to have displayed that sense of courage through a poem on stage and be so articulate with it and so strong to tell people what she'd gone through, and the support that she was given. We always say that, Goals4Girls is the one who, may have supported or may have allowed them to survive. But really and truly, it's that young girl who allowed herself to survive. She just used us as a catalyst and a vessel to lean on through her own personal power, to understand her own personal trauma. Through that, we were just that support system. That's all we were. I would never say that we take the credit for it. I'll just turn around and say that we were just there at the right time, and she used what she could use out of us to survive. And she's come out the other end as an amazing young woman.
I haven't been to much women's football, but I've been to watch AFC Wimbledon a few times. But I went to the Emirates for the Continental Cup the other day, and I was just so impressed with the whole vibe of it all. The atmosphere was great, and the football was fantastic. But this explosion in women's football, how is it helping you? How is it helping Goals4Girls create maximum impact?
Yeah, I think the explosion is massive, and we're able to get a lot more girls in community. It's becoming more accepting, and that's the answer. It's becoming more accepting. When you've been doing this work in communities which have, so many different opinions on how women should participate in sport, it's now building that that trust with a lot of cross-direct generational individuals who still might be stuck in certain ways of how they think, how their cultures are set up, and allowing them to see the space as accepting, open, and there's a career out of it. And I think that's what it's allowing a lot of people to do. We're seeing so many young women now who are probably the first of many who are breaking down barriers and acting as that role model of representation for so many more young women and girls out there. So for me, it's it's showing young girls a pipeline. It's showing young girls representation, barriers that are being broken down, and it's a hot topic. But I really do think we've got an awful long way to go. As the pipeline is growing through, the WSL, and we're seeing the success of the WSL, and we're seeing the investment which is going into the women's game. There is a generation of young women and girls who are left behind. There is even more so barriers which are actually being created outside of the system, which people are overlooking massively. And one of those are, where the ECT centres are being set up, that it's too far for girls from inner city communities to travel, which is a barrier, which means when we are looking at what the representation across the board looks like, even though we are seeing percentages in there, maybe the 1 or 2% who are, acting as them role models, it isn't enough, because we are still creating barriers within the communities for girls to still be able to access those them football clubs or the academies or the pipelines, where girls are getting picked up from. The investment which is going into grassroots organisations and clubs, the facilities are still not where they need to be. Even though there is a rise of girls' football clubs, a lot of people are trying to build out their girls' provisions on the side of existing boys' provisions within their clubs. And unfortunately, these are volunteered hours. They're not being staffed or managed effectively, which means there's a lot of girls who are dropping off still. And these are things which are still barriers that we're facing. These are things that are still issues. And I do think that if we don't start building the pyramid from the bottom up, we're going to miss out on the generation of girls who are going to be left behind.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I went to an event at the Adidas headquarters of Goals4Girls a little while ago, there were some real stats around funding for initiatives like this around women and girls. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that and what needs to improve?
Yeah, there's over 200,000 registered charities in the UK. And only 1.8% of funding goes to women and girls organisations. So if we're talking about the last question that you asked me regarding, it's amazing when we're going into these stadiums and we're seeing what we're seeing, and it is amazing. And it's aspirational. But what we're finding is then there's organisations, like I just said before, within the grassroots and in the charity world, which are doing this hard generational work to bridge the gap to allow for sustainability of that model. There's only 2% of funding which actually comes through that pipeline for women and girls led charities or organisations. And like I said, 1.8% for literally female founded led organisations. So it's just showing you how big that gap is to actually creating a pipeline for our future generation of lionesses,
Yeah.
or just athletes in general, just sports women.
Yeah. And are you confident that, are you seeing enough to see that that's going to change dramatically? How confident are you in the shift in attitudes towards women and girls projects like this?
I'll give you our projects for example. We survive of very trusted relationships with we've got a couple of corporate partners which allow us to do our work. For the scale of the impact that we have, you would think that we are a £1 million organization. We are not, nowhere near, but we do everything with purpose, and we do everything to the highest of our potential. And I'll give you an example. We launched a series of football tournaments, and we've got a waiting list of over 35 schools, football clubs nationally, but we have a very, very small staff member, like full-time members of staff. We only have 4 full-time members of staff, and the rest are all people who are contracted in or support us through the work that we do or volunteer. Which means for us, what then tends to happen is, when we're not able to scale as quickly as other people, despite the fact that our ideas are innovative, they're impactful, they're life-changing. But what we do is whatever we do deliver in, whether that's our football tournaments, our, girls' insight work, where we, lead on a lot of insight projects and help other people build out their projects, or it's through our mental health and well-being programs, educational programs, we do it great. And, we have a 97% retention rate on all of our programs. We have a major success rate. We have, over 65% of girls who come through our program say that within the first 10 weeks of our programs, their mental health and confidence has shifted dramatically. So it shows that we are having, high percentages of impact. But for us to scale the way that we aim to scale, we need for the system to work from the bottom up and allow for projects to actually build the pipeline of our future, whether that's boardroom, C-suite women and beyond. We did a report not so long ago with Sky, their game-changing report, and they were saying that the majority of C-suite women have come through a sporting background, which just shows you already the power of sport from such a young age. And if we can be that vessel for the future generations of, business women, athletes, and, and beyond, or just having a baseline of girls within society who have better mental health issues, then, we've done our job. But we can't do our job if that investment isn't coming our way. The NHS reported, last year that, and you heard it at the event, that, there was a rise. I think it was, I think the hospitalization was risen by 67% for young women and girls who's been hospitalized between the ages of 14 to 16 of the last 3 to 5 years. That is major.
Mental health issues.
Showing you the impacts of why these projects are needed within these communities and beyond.
Yeah. No, it's mad figures. And so just taking a step back, so you're running day to day. You founded this incredible organization. You're running this day to day. How hard is it kind of running something that is so rooted in your own trauma? The whole reasons that Goals4Girls came about. How hard is it, or how does that affect your work?
It doesn't affect. The reason why I'm sat here today is because it's given me a voice to educate, to teach people, to guide people, and to be a focal point of aspiration for girls to realize that if she can do it, I can do it. And for me, I always see it as therapy still. It's funny, like I'll go I'm not on the ground as much no more, but when I used to be, deeply involved in the therapeutic support, I would see it as therapy myself. I'd see it as another grounding moment to say thank you that I'm still here.
Yeah.
To hear the trauma of a lot of girls and to see what they're going through. Because when I reflect and look back, despite my journey being my journey and my story, and despite that being traumatic in my own way, my story has made me into the woman I am today. And it's allowed me to use that story as in an impactful way to, change the lives of hundreds and thousands of girls. If I'm able to do that and share that experience with girls, I think that is a privilege to be able to do. And if I'm able to inspire girls to come out on the other side, then that also is a privilege. So I don't see it as an organization wrapped up in trauma. I see it as an organization wrapped up in insight. And what I mean by that insight is I'm able to educate people through my lived experience. I'm able to talk to girls through a lens of respect and understanding, to allow them to envision what it looks like on the other side of what they're going through. And despite the fact that I've not stepped foot in their shoes in particularly, it allows me to stay grounded all the time, deeply to the work on the ground. A lot of chief executives leave and go, and they'll sit in their offices and pretend that they know what these girls need in the community. My ears are very closely to the ground. I take a lot of time to go and get to know the participants in our programs, to hear their stories, to learn about them, talk to their parents. I still do that till today because we're not able to be a charity which is insight led and we can turn around and say that our programs are for the girls and by the girls if we're not listening to what they actually want. And I think that's why we have such a major success with all the work that we do, because me and my team are very deeply rooted in understanding the participant.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Just to ask a final question. So if society could change one thing about how it deals with women and girls' mental health support, what would it be, Francesca?
Oh, good question. I probably would shift the response and the focus from crisis response and early connection. Too many girls are only taken seriously once they're visibly struggling. And we need to normalize support before things fall apart, to invest in spaces where girls can explore identity, emotion, belonging without needing a diagnosis or a breaking point. And mental health support shouldn't feel like a last resort. It should feel like a community. And if I was to kind of like explain that in a lot of detail to you, Xavier, I feel that a lot of interventions are put in place too late for young women and girls, and they're not put in place before that drop-off point, and the girls are not educated enough about the systems and the barriers that they're about to embark on as they go into adolescence. So I feel like a lot of programs wait to be responsive. A lot of organizations and investment and support work wait for the breaking point rather than actually intervene before that to prevent it. So I think we need more prevention work in society to allow for these systems and structures to be sustained better. And that's something that we're doing a lot through the work that we do. As you know, we start off at age 11, but then we really focus in on the ages of 13 to 14 where that drop-off rate is at its highest. And then what we do then is we ensure then as you do the dip, a lot of the girls are then given, very sustainable pathways beyond that dip. So they stay within the system of sport and education. So for me, it's about how do we create early intervention rather than reactive intervention?
Yeah, Okay, that's brilliant. Francesca, thanks so much for sharing your story and for talking to us about Goals for Girls and all the amazing work you're doing. It's exactly what power sport is about. Really appreciate it. And
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you too.